I'm 62 years old, and I need to tell you something I have never said out loud to anyone back in Columbus, Ohio, because I was too ashamed to form the words. She told me she was a virgin, 26 years old, sitting across from me at a restaurant in Leyte province, looking me straight in the face with the most sincere expression I have ever seen on another human being, and she told me she had saved herself, that she was waiting for the right man, that she believed her body and her love were sacred things meant only for the man she would marry. I want to be honest about what that did to me, because I think you need to understand it. I am a 62-year-old man from the American Midwest. I was raised in a world that told me innocence was the most valuable thing a woman could offer, and I had spent the last decade of my life feeling like everything around me was disposable and cynical and used up. That story, delivered in that voice in that candlelit restaurant, hit me somewhere I did not know I was still vulnerable. I chased that story for 16 months and $350,000. It was never true. It was a costume she had worn many times before, perfectly fitted, perfectly maintained, with a price tag she never showed me until there was nothing left to pay. If you are sitting on a retirement fund and there is a sweet-voiced woman on your phone who talks about God and family and never asking for much, watch every second of this video. Then subscribe, because there is more where this came from, and you need all of it. I was not looking for a young woman when I booked the flight. I want to be clear about that because I know what you might be thinking, and I'm asking you to set it aside for now. I was 60 years old, recently retired, alone in a two-bedroom apartment in Columbus with a microwave and a cable subscription, and a quiet that pressed in from all four walls every single evening. I had spent 32 years as a logistics supervisor, managed freight, managed people, managed complex systems, and the company eliminated my position in a corporate restructuring with a form letter and a handshake. My divorce had finalized 6 years before that. My kids had their own lives in other cities, the way good kids do when you raise them right. I was functional. I was stable. I was profoundly, structurally lonely in a way I had no vocabulary for, because men my age from the Midwest are not given vocabulary for loneliness. I started watching the expat content the way you start watching any content at 11 p.m. when the apartment is too quiet. One video about a 63-year-old American eating a full meal in Cebu for $3. Then 20 more. Then 100. The formula in those videos is specific, and it worked on me completely. American man, invisible in his own country, goes to the Philippines, is treated like a king, finds warmth and purpose, and a woman who actually looks up when he walks into the room. I am telling you this without shame because I believe most of the men watching this channel understand exactly what I mean, and pretending otherwise helps nobody. I found a marriage-focused Filipino dating site, not a hookup platform, a serious website full of profiles describing women who were family-oriented, Christian, traditional. I posted an honest profile. 60 years old, retired, looking for genuine companionship, looking for a woman with real values. Joy found that profile on a Tuesday. Her message was thoughtful, careful, referencing things I had actually written. She was 26, from Leyte, an office worker. Her photos showed a modest-looking woman in plain clothes, cross visible at her neck. She did not write about herself the way someone performs for a camera. She wrote the way someone reveals themselves, slowly, cautiously, as if trust was a thing that had to be earned. I found that more attractive than anything else she could have done, and I think if you are honest with yourself, you would have too. What I did not understand at the time was that her restraint was itself a calculated presentation. Every element, the modest photos, the religious symbol, the careful writing, the questions about my hometown instead of my finances, had been calibrated for a specific target. Not a tourist, not a young man, a lonely, older Western man with money and traditional values baked in from decades ago. I was that audience. I responded exactly as designed. The 4 months of nightly calls that followed were not a love story being written. They were a data collection operation, assembling the most complete possible picture of my emotional vulnerabilities before the in-person phase began. 4 months of nightly video calls. She learned the names of my children, my hometown, the route I drove to work for 20 years. She prayed before our calls, quietly, quickly, like someone who actually believed in it rather than performing it. She cried when I told her my father had died without us ever fully reconciling, and she said simply that she was sorry and that she hoped he knew. I want you to hold that detail because it matters. She was not just collecting financial information, she was collecting emotional information, and the portrait she was building of me was infinitely more valuable to her than any bank statement. The conversation about her purity happened during my second week in the Philippines. We were at dinner, a quiet restaurant near her hometown, and the conversation turned to past relationships. I had been honest about my marriage, my divorce, the years of quiet. She was quiet for a moment, and then she told me that she had never been in a serious relationship, that she had been raised to believe that certain things were sacred, that she had watched her friends make choices she did not agree with, and she had chosen to wait. She did not deliver this as a speech. She said it the way someone says something personal and slightly embarrassing, looking at the table, turning her water glass in her hands. She said she hoped that was not strange to hear. It was the most powerful thing she could have said to me, not because I am some kind of Puritan, but because of what it promised. It promised a clean slate, a relationship built from the first page, with a woman who had not been worn down or made cynical by bad experiences, who was offering something whole and unguarded. Every lonely, invisible thing in me reached for that story with both hands, and she had calculated exactly that it would. The first cash request arrived 6 weeks into my stay, and it came at 3 a.m. My phone lit up with a WhatsApp voice message, not a text, a voice message, from Joy's older sister. Her voice was tight and frightened. Their mother had been rushed to the emergency room at the provincial hospital. Chest pains. They had no money for the admission deposit. Joy's phone had run out of credit. The sister needed to reach me. Could I help? The message was 40 seconds long, and I listened to it standing in the dark in the hallway of my rented apartment, still half asleep, and I transferred 25,000 pesos, about $450, inside of 10 minutes, before I had even fully processed what was happening. That timing was not accidental. 3 a.m. is when your critical thinking is offline. 3 a.m, a frightened woman's voice, a mother's life at stake. There is no calculation available at that hour that leads to the word no. I understand now that the 3 a.m. delivery was a choice. I understand that the voice message was more effective than a text because hearing fear in a human voice bypasses reasoning in a way that words on a screen do not. I understand that the entire performance, sister, voice note, timing, was assembled with care and experience. At 3 a.m. in a dark hallway in Leyte province, I understood none of this. The requests that followed used the same emotional architecture, just varied in their details. The sick carabao, the family's water buffalo, their primary farming tool, needed a veterinarian or they would lose their livelihood. The youngest brother needed school fees or his enrollment would be canceled. A flooding event damaged the province house, and the repairs could not wait. Each request came from a different family member using a different communication channel with a different specific story. They were never presented as linked. They were always presented as isolated, unfortunate, temporary. The money was always framed as a loan that would be repaid once things stabilized. And Joy was always quietly, beautifully grateful, always reassuring me that this was not normal, that things would be different soon, that she was so sorry to always be dealing with these problems. There was one request I want to describe in particular because I think it illustrates the technique more precisely than any of the others. We were 9 months in. Joy came to me one evening and said her younger brother, the one she had been paying tuition for, had been in a minor motorcycle accident. He was fine, she said quickly. He was fine, no serious injuries. But the other driver was threatening to make it a legal matter unless compensated for damage to his vehicle. The amount was 35,000 pesos, about $600. She had already spoken to a lawyer, a friend of her uncle, and had been told the quickest resolution was to settle privately before it escalated. She showed me the written estimate for the vehicle damage, which appeared to be a real document with a letterhead and a signature. She showed me a photograph of the damaged motorcycle. She said she was mortified to be asking, that she had tried to solve it another way, and she placed the documents on the table between us and looked away as if she could not bear to watch me read them. $600, a legal threat, a document with a letterhead, a photograph, a mortified woman who could not make eye contact. The entire package was so complete, so specific, so exactly what a real situation would look like, that the idea of not paying it would have required me to accuse her of lying. And I was not there yet. Over 10 months, I moved between $110,000 and $130,000 out of my savings in this fashion. I lost count of the exact amount because, as I said, I was never thinking of it as a sum. I was thinking of it as individual kindnesses, individual decisions to be a decent man in a difficult situation. I want you to sit with that number anyway. $130,000 gone in 10 months through $200, $400, $800 transactions, each one emotionally justified in the moment, each one a perfectly designed brick in a structure I could not see because I was standing inside it. The discovery did not come through anything heroic. It came through a photograph on a cheap Nokia phone that Joy left on the kitchen table while she showered. The photo was 3 years old. I could see that from the metadata when I looked more closely. It showed Joy at a birthday party, arms around a young Filipino man, both of them laughing. Nothing extraordinary about a photograph at a birthday party. What stopped me was her expression. I had spent 10 months studying Joy's face. I knew her genuine expressions, and I knew her performed ones. In this photograph, with this man, she looked genuinely happy in a way I had never once produced in her. The ease in her body, the way she leaned into him, the absence of any performance. I put the phone back exactly where it was and went and sat on the balcony and looked at the street below for a long time. I did not say anything when she came out. I watched her face when she saw the phone and checked it. There was a flicker, brief, controlled. She put it in her pocket and said nothing, and I understood, in the specific quiet of that moment, that I had been looking at the real Joy for the first time. The woman in that photograph, laughing freely with a man her own age, with no calculations running behind her eyes. That was her. Everything she had ever shown me was a costume. I confronted her 3 days later. I am not going to describe the details because they are too painful and because they do not matter. What matters is what she revealed in that confrontation. Not guilt, not remorse, not any trace of the warmth she had shown me for 10 months. What I saw was impatience. The mask does not come off dramatically, it slides. And what is underneath is simply a person who has moved to the exit and is waiting for you to clear the doorway. I want to tell you clearly and without softening it what I am now. I am living in a $10 room in Manila. My $350,000 is gone, the $130,000 in transfers to her family, and the remainder drained through the life I built here, the flights, the apartment rentals, the daily expenses of a man who was spending freely because he believed he was building a permanent life. My Social Security payment keeps me in rice and bus fare in this city, which is cheap enough that I survive. I cannot go home. I have no home. I gave up my lease, sold my furniture, closed my accounts. I arrived here permanently, and that is what I remain. The woman who told me she was a virgin, who cried at my father's memory, who prayed before video calls, who turned her water glass in her hands and looked at the table and said she hoped it was not strange to hear, is 28 years old now and has an active profile on the same dating site where she found me. I was told recently by someone who knows her that the man in that birthday party photograph has been with her continuously throughout and after our entire relationship. I do not know if I was the first man she ran this on. I know I was not the last. Here is what I want to leave you with. The innocence presentation is a weapon. The virgin narrative, the modesty, the prayer, the turned water glass, the reluctant admission, is designed with surgical precision for a specific target, a man who is tired, lonely, and hungry for something that feels untouched by the world's cynicism. That hunger is real, and there is nothing shameful about it. But the woman feeding it with that story is not feeding a hunger. She is identifying an entry point. And once she has found it, every dollar you earned in 40 years is accessible through it. Subscribe to this channel. Watch every video I post. The specific details change. The architecture does not. You need to know the architecture before you get on that plane. I am 62 years old. I am broke, and I did not see it coming. But you can. That is the only reason I am still talking.